This is CBC Vancouver News.
We're going grocery shopping right now, and it's like so expensive every time. It's literally double.
From food,
lots of families are going to be running into trouble,
to housing, higher costs push BC's living wage way up.
And fish habitat became one with industry and farms and houses and septic fields.
From cocaine to pesticides, the alarming pollutants found in Abbotsford fish habitat after last year's floods.
Nothing was more unlikely than me becoming premier, and there's no shortage of people from my youth that can attest to that statement.
John Horgan's last day. The premier says goodbye while David Eby prepares to take over. Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. If it wasn't obvious already, we're getting even more evidence now of just how expensive it is to live in this province. The living wage, the amount that families need to survive, is going up. Michelle Gassoub reports on why and what it means for you.
From Vancouver to Kelowna to Victoria, people are feeling the pinch.
Seems like it can't really continue at the pace that it's been increasing, or else lots of families are going to be running into trouble.
We're going grocery shopping right now, and it's like so expensive every time. It's literally double.
Now, a new report released by the Living Wage for Families campaign and the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives is showing it takes more than ever just to get by. It found that for a family with 2 young children in Metro Vancouver, both parents would need to earn at least $24.02 an hour at a full-time job to earn a living wage. In Victoria, both parents would need to make $24.29 an hour, and that number is even higher in communities like Golden and Haida Gwaii.
This is one of the reasons that philosophically we're a little bit different than most of the businesses out there, especially in home care.
Matthew Lowe is the director of Community Plus Care, a nursing and home care service in Victoria with about 50 employees and one of 400 employers across BC committed to paying a living wage.
It's a humane decision, right? If your business doesn't support people to live and survive, I'm not even going to say comfortably, because the living wage is not comfortable. It's minimal. If you're not going to do that, then you don't have a business worth operating.
A living wage reflects what it takes to pay for necessities, and it doesn't cover things like paying down debt, saving for retirement, or going on vacation. The minimum wage in BC, while on the rise, is not keeping up.
There are some employers who won't kind of step up to the plate and won't voluntarily pay their staff a living wage. And that's where we kind of really need to see the minimum wage go up so that that gap between the minimum and the living wage is smaller.
As the prices of housing, food, and just about everything else in this province grow, the money needed to keep your head above water stretching out of reach for some. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Those rising prices, including rent, have some people reconsidering their future here. New data shows the price of a 1-bedroom apartment in Vancouver is now north of $2,500. The CBC's Yasmin Gandam spoke to some women who say the high prices have forced them into some very uncomfortable situations.
If you're like me and you're just on your own and paying your way, like you're gonna have to just keep your head up and persevere.
Rhea Azaraga has spent the last 3 months hunting for a new apartment. The 29-year-old recently broke up with her boyfriend, but while they're no longer romantically involved, the pair has remained roommates. That is, until recently. After seeing dozens of listings, Azaraga found a place, but it's not exactly cheap.
And I'm paying $1,750 for just under 500 square foot basement suite.
She says her only option would be to live with roommates.
Well, from what I found, where people are kind of cramming 4 people in a 3-bedroom apartment.
She isn't alone. Other renters say they're also struggling to find affordable places to live.
There used to be a time where if you lived with 2 other people, you got to save a little bit of money. That doesn't seem to exist anymore. There was essentially nothing that we could find under $1,000 per bedroom.
Statistics from rentals.ca, a digital rental platform, shows Vancouver ranks the highest for rent, with the average price of a 1-bedroom renting at just over $2,500 a month. This comes as shelters across the Lower Mainland are full, and financial hardship is one of the many reasons why women are unable to move away when they separate from their partners.
We do know that women who are in our services right now in transitional housing, so they've gone to shelter, they want to move out, they want to find a new place to live. They're sort of stuck in the system because of those high rents, barrier on the other side.
Rental prices are so bad it's got Azarga and others reconsidering their future in the city.
I'd probably be able to afford like a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, like everything that I wanted and more, and not have to like worry, oh, like if I make this purchase on the weekend, if I go out for dinner with my friends.
As she settles into her new apartment, she says Vancouver is home, at least for now. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
We are already into mid-November with plenty of snow falling across BC. But people in a rural area of the Fraser Valley are being told to be ready to leave their homes on short notice because of a wildfire. Earlier tonight, the District of Kent issued an evacuation alert to people living near the Limbert Mountain Blaze, west of Agassiz. The properties are on your screen there. They're south of Highway 7 within CPR Road on the north, Cameron Road on the west, and Limbert Road to the south and east. The district asks people to get a grab-and-go bag ready and have copies of important documents and mementos. You can find updates on the District of Kent's Facebook page. BC Wildfire says the blaze is 1.2 hectares and is believed to be caused by people. John Horgan made his final public appearance as Premier of the province today, speaking to the BC Chamber of Commerce.
But I keep thinking I'm going to pinch myself and wake up in the Confederation cafeteria and it's all been a dream, because nothing was more unlikely than me becoming Premier, and there's no shortage of people from my youth that can attest to that statement.
Horgan spent much of the day reflecting on his 36-year career, saying he first aspired to be the province's energy minister, but being Premier is, quote, the best job in the universe. He says his proudest accomplishment is passing the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
We need, as a society, to recognize and acknowledge the territories that was expropriated from the First Peoples who have been here since time immemorial, and I think all British Columbians get that.
Horgan will hand over the reins to incoming Premier David Eby, who will be sworn in tomorrow. Mira Baines has more on the transition.
I'm excited. You know, I've got those butterflies before a big event. I think a lot of people will probably recognize that feeling.
David Eby has big plans to hit the ground running after he's sworn in as Premier. The ceremony is taking place at the Musqueam Cultural Centre, but he will be back here in Victoria next week. He says he wants to introduce legislation right away to tackle some of the province's most pressing issues.
You're going to see some really significant initiatives on public safety, on healthcare, on housing right out of the gate, and it's important for me to deliver for British Columbians on these issues. British Columbians can't afford to wait.
Eby is a lawyer and former head of the BC Civil Liberties Association and known for defending the rights of marginalized people, some who are living on the streets. He says housing is a top priority, but some mayors have expressed concerns over the province taking a heavy hand to push through projects.
It's not going to be the provincial government that solves this by ourselves. We're going to need the cities, we're going to need the private sector, the nonprofits and others. And you'll see certainly from our government that we're going to partner with those fast-growing municipalities to provide support so they can deliver housing. It's going to be a different relationship, but it's going to be a very positive relationship with cities. I'm excited about it.
But there are concerns that Eby's government will push through legislation in the last 4 days of the legislative session without proper scrutiny.
But if he's talking about any large structural changes and he thinks he's going to try and drive that through in 4 days, I can tell you this, that the public is not going to accept that, especially if it involves significant changes to the healthcare system or to housing. I can assure you that we will make a lot of noise about that if he tries to jam something through without proper debate and discussion.
Challenges lie ahead for David Eby. The yoga fan is a dad with a young family based in Vancouver, so he will be balancing that with running the province. Eby plans to introduce a new cabinet, which will be sworn in next month. Mira Baines, CBC News, Victoria.
From pesticides to street drugs. Last year's floods in Abbotsford brought high levels of contaminants to the water there, including the local fish habitat. John Hernandez has more on the push to protect BC's valuable ecosystems.
We've been here thousands and thousands of years, and we've adapted to so many different changes.
Sumas First Nation Chief Dalton Silver fears his community can only withstand so much.
And I think in a short period of time, we've seen what our people can call destruction of the homelands. And it's something that needs to change.
1 year since the catastrophic floods, results of a water sample analysis from the area are pouring in. Researchers determined to find out how the floods may have affected fish habitat.
All this meant that the waters rose above fish habitat, and fish habitat became one with industry and farms and houses and septic fields and wastewater treatment plants.
Samples gathered in the Sumas Lake area in the weeks after the flood showed excessive amounts of pollutants, from metals to pesticides, even cocaine and artificial sweeteners. Toxicologist Peter Ross calls the findings a reflection of heavy land use and human behavior.
The former waters of the Sumas Lake area have been severely degraded by a very wide variety of contaminants coming from all of our activities, let's face it.
A lack of historical data means researchers can't attribute contamination to the floods, but say it likely exacerbated already poor water quality in the area. The findings are fueling calls for better land management in the area, including the need for buffers between farms and fish habitat.
There's some fairly easy wins to protect fish habitat. I mentioned a couple, like trying to protect that riparian zone right adjacent to waterways would be number one.
I think that if we can put our heads together and look at what we can do to improve things and try to fix some things up, those that we can, I think we'll all be in a better place.
BC's Environment Ministry says it's reviewing the report, noting that its own samples found limited environmental risks. But the Sumas Nation says the strength of future fish returns will tell the true story. John Hernandez, CBC News, Abbotsford.
Hundreds of thousands of lights are shining bright outside St. Paul's Hospital in downtown Vancouver tonight. The Lights of Hope display has returned to fundraise for healthcare in BC. Visitors looked up to see the starry lights turn on earlier tonight. It marks the first public Lights of Hope celebration since the pandemic began. They hope to raise $3.6 million this year for St. Paul's Hospital Foundation. The money will go to urgently needed medical equipment, community programs, and research. The lights will twinkle brightly until January 6th. Well, it's taken months of deconstruction, but the barge at English Bay has finally shipped off. The large barge washed up during last November's devastating storms. During its residence in the West End, some locals took a shine to the funky flotsam. Last year, the park board even unofficially named that part of Sunset Beach Barge Chilling Beach, because why not? The BC Lions lost their chance to make the Grey Cup last Sunday, but the team's quarterback won a big consolation prize today.
And the most outstanding Canadian player this year is...
two-time John Cornish winner, Nathan Rourke.
Rourke was named the league's most outstanding Canadian at the CFL Awards in Regina tonight. The 24-year-old is only the third quarterback to ever win the title. Despite missing several games due to injury this season, the Victoria native finished second in touchdown passes and set a new record for completion percentage. Well done. Still the sports, a BC downhill skateboarder has trounced the fastest riders on the planet to be crowned the 2022 world champion again.
I'm going to cherish that forever. Hopefully, maybe my kids one day will look at it and be just as stoked as I am.
Dane Hanna took home the gold this week in San Juan, Argentina. He rose to the top of 200 other skaters going head-to-head against the best on the planet, hurtling down the track at up to 90 kilometers an hour. Hanna grew up in Pender Harbor on the Sunshine Coast, training locally and watching the annual Attack of Danger Bay downhill skateboard race.
It's starting to all sink in and realize, wow, I finally done it. So I'm really happy with myself and proud of everyone that's helped me out along the way. And I don't know, I couldn't be happier.
This is the second time Hanna has proven he's the fastest thing on four wheels, but because of the pandemic, the event hasn't been held since 2019. A Vancouver Island woman came across a feathered invader running afoul over the weekend. Take a look. Tina Gabbery was checking on a friend's house on Sunday. She arrived to find the place in a bit of disarray. After thinking her friend had been robbed, she looked up and spotted that An owl perched on the dining room chandelier. This is the second time an owl has broken into an Oak Bay home in recent weeks. Pictures taken at the scene suggest it's the same bird. Canada is getting ready to play in the World Cup next week as teams prepare for Qatar's new soccer stadiums. Concerns remain about the harsh conditions migrants faced to build them. Stick around. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. Thanks for being here. A Quebec teenager recently underwent a rare and innovative surgery that's proven to be a life-changer. Doctors at the Montreal Children's Hospital used a new technique to treat a severe deformity that she was born with. As Chloe Rinaldi shows us, she wants her story to offer hope for others.
In her hospital room, Emeraude Zuniga is recovering from her 6-hour-long surgery.
Je me suis vue dans le miroir, puis c'était tout plat, puis j'étais comme, mon Dieu.
Zuniga says when she saw herself in the mirror and her chest was flat, she was overjoyed. The 17-year-old was born with a rare chest wall anomaly. Her sternum was misaligned, creating a lump.
She had been knocking on the doors of multiple hospitals and clinics for a couple of years because she felt her chest had a lump that wasn't supposed to be there.
So Dr. Wisanji and a team of doctors at the Children's developed an innovative surgery to fix it.
To do this, we have to remove parts of the cartilages. So these hold the sternum in place with the ribs. We had to remove them and then literally saw the sternum to break that angle.
After that, they inserted a bar in her chest to raise it. The surgeons also used another new procedure in Quebec called cryotherapy. It freezes the nerves around her ribs.
Before, kids used to stay 5 to 6 days at the hospital for pain management after the surgery, and now they can leave on the first day after surgery. Also, it reduces a lot the number of consumption of opioids or morphine or Dilaudid that we give to kids.
Wisanji says the operation helps the kids with their self-esteem.
It has a big impact on children as they mature and they become adults because it changes the way they think about themselves, and it's much more than just a physical correction.
Emeraude says she's sure this will give her more confidence.
Pour, mettons, d'autres enfants ou adolescents qui vont voir ça en ligne.
She hopes her story will show others they aren't alone and that there are solutions. Chloe Rinaldi, CBC News, Montreal.
The start of the Men's World Cup tournament is just a few days away. Billions of eyes will be on Qatar's new soccer stadiums. But what attention will be on the crews who built them? Thousands of migrant workers endured harsh conditions. Many died, and advocates have long demanded action. But as Thomas Dagler reports, ahead of Sunday's kickoff, their calls have gone unanswered.
Touching down in Doha, a steady stream of the world's best players, ready to compete for their countries on soccer's biggest stage.
It's a World Cup, no matter when it is in the time of the year. It's in the winter now, we're here in 30-degree heat, but we want to enjoy it.
For Canada, first came a pit stop in Dubai for a final warm-up match. Still missing in action is the team's biggest star. Alphonso Davies remains sidelined with a hamstring strain.
Fonzie's en route now to join us, and we'll assess him as soon as he arrives.
England's team meeting with migrant workers, reminding the world of the harsh, sometimes deadly conditions laborers endured to build tournament infrastructure.
Everything you see in Doha was built by migrant workers. Thank you so much to everyone.
Human rights advocates again sounding the alarm as Qatar's capital makes final preparations. Activist Yassin Kakande releasing this picture. Behind him, migrant workers trying to rest with no shade from Doha's scorching sun, raising questions about promised labor reforms.
What Qatar has been doing has been only addressing that spotlight, working to satisfy the international community.
Because then opposition. As for those Canadians, they looked for an upset over higher-ranked Japan. Stephen Vittoria tying the match in the first half. Then Lucas Cavallini cashed in on a penalty kick, the ball barely crossing the line for the win.
For Canada, it's our first.
Some team members making it clear this World Cup is about more than soccer.
What our plan is to go and show the world what Canada's all about. We truly believe that our morals set us apart.
Next week come the biggest challenges yet for Canada on the field and for Qatar on the world stage.
The CBC's Thomas Dagler reporting. There's a live shot of a very blue harbor center. Grouse Mountain in the background. Another sunny, crisp South Coast day. Johanna will have your BC-wide weather forecast as things start to change next week.
You could live through a lifetime of wartime remembrances and never see one quite like this.
They lost their lives while in the service of their country and ours.
Presiding in the rainforest is British Columbia's Lieutenant Governor, her elegant shoes planted in the mud. Around her, amid the logs and ferns, a small band of veterans ponders the rusting hulk of a wartime DC-3 and the fate of the British pilots who crashed here on a training exercise back in 1944.
Of the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
It's a strange story. Strange because it's taken 58 years to set up a memorial for the two pilots who ran out of fuel in bad weather near Port Hardy at the northern tip of Vancouver Island. Only the gunner survived the crash, and as the war in Europe drew to a close, the two pilots were buried with little notice in Victoria. Not as heroes who fell in combat, but as victims of an accident. And somehow that wasn't good enough for veterans like Lou Lepine. He thought they took the same risks and paid the same price as their buddies in combat.
Dead is dead, whether it's flying on operations or training exercises like this. So we must recognize the valor of these young men who flew and defended our way of life.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land.
Lepine set out to rally his fellow veterans to organize this ceremony in the woods. But it wasn't easy. After so long, the old plane was inaccessible and overgrown.
It was eerie, spooky. The moss was hanging down, very little light, wet and soggy. And there was the old girl sitting there, just forgotten. Well, she's not forgotten now.
Not forgotten. It's the plane as much as the pilots that brings back memories for many Air Force vets. Few can forget the long service of the DC-3, workhorse which inspired loyalty both in war and peace. But what about the pilots? In this case, the trail's gone cold after so long, and little is known of J.M. Talbot and T.S. Wardlow. They just vanished into the statistics until now.
And we know that because of today, their sacrifice will be continued to be remembered where brave people meet and consider the power of service and duty and discipline in the service of one's country.
God save our gracious Queen,
For these veterans, then, you don't get forgotten just because you didn't die in battle. So this remembrance in the rainforest finally went ahead, even if it was 58 years late. Gary Malewski, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Join Kitsand journalist Angela Starrett as she uncovers land theft in Canada in the new CBC British Columbia original podcast, Land Back, out November 15th. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox and keep connected with us.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Time for a BC-wide weather forecast with meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe. But Joe, we need to shift you to seismologist now because we've had some sizable seismic activity, easy for me to say, in BC recently.
That's true. I'm not going to try and re-say that, but what I will tell you is we are getting more information about the earthquakes just north of Fort St. John that happened on the 11th and then 4 days later on the 15th of November. Take a look at the epicenters of these two earthquakes. Moderate size, magnitude 4.7, followed by that 4.6, less than 1 kilometer from each other. At the time, seismologists thought that this was likely connected to hydraulic fracking, where you inject a solution underground, and that can reactivate old fault lines, sort of making rocks more easily slippable. And now the Oil and Gas Commission is saying that those two events likely connected to fracking. They suspended operations, but they have since resumed. But this is on the upper end of earthquakes that we see in Western Canada. And that is one of the big clues that we first had. This was likely connected to fracking. Back to the weather, and we've got that big old high pressure sitting, well, basically in the Arctic, and it's a long high pressure, so connecting that Arctic air all the way down across BC. It's also being the culprit for fog, sort of trapping that low-level moisture. And so we still have fog advisories in place for the east side of the island, as well as the Sunshine Coast, sort of one more morning of seeing that dense fog. Temperatures dropping as well over the next couple of days for afternoon highs. We've got a couple more days under that high-pressure ridge. So Friday and Saturday, very similar to the days we've been having. Look at this, though. By Sunday, increasing cloud, and Monday, the door is open once again to Pacific systems. So if you were worried that this long, sunny, dry stretch, regardless if you were enjoying it or not, was getting a bit reminiscent of our October drought, the rain is coming. And it looks like once that door is open, Dan, all next week, showers. So enjoy the cold.
Wedged open.
Yes, exactly. Slammed open. No. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Dramatic.
Yes, indeed. Finally, he's called the boss for a reason. He weighs more than 660 pounds, one of the biggest grizzly bears to roam Banff National Park. He survived, among other things, being hit by a train, and he's killed and eaten his rivals. And last weekend, a nature photographer managed to shoot him through his camera lens.
He's beautiful, he's magnificent, and he's very large. He's a massive creature. I've seen a lot of different bears over my lifetime, and this bear is really healthy right now. I didn't know that it was the boss, obviously, when I saw the tracks. When he popped his head up from digging behind that log, yeah, I knew right away, because the boss on his right side, he's missing part of his ear. He was bear number 122, and I think there was an ear tag there, and at some point it must have got pulled out, and that's how he's very recognizable. This is our patriarch of the valley. You know, he's most likely the father around 70% of the cubs, and to see him going into hibernation so healthy, it's good news for our grizzly bear populations out here in the valley.
Do what the boss says. That's your late news for Thursday. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news anytime, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. And I will be in the host chair tomorrow night at 6 p.m. So we'll see you then. Good night.